Hey guys, John here from Bring the SEO. Today we're going to be talking about exclusivity. And in this short presentation, we'll be covering 5 reasons why you should reconsider offering exclusivity for SEO. Often, especially when dealing with new prospects, not necessarily existing clients, but certainly new prospects, they might request exclusivity, or they might say something along the lines of, hey, we don't want you working with our competitors. And I've always found this to be an unusual request and in some ways quite rude. Now, what I'm about to cover, these 5 things, probably go against much of the advice that exists in the SEO space, because I know that for most agencies, their preference is to offer exclusivity. Now, there may be, people might have a difference of opinion, and that's fine. But this is a discussion that I've been involved in for quite a long time. And the more I think about offering exclusivity, at least offering exclusivity for SEO services, the more I tend to think it's the wrong approach. So let's start with point 1. It's none of their business who your other clients are. So I want to ask 2 questions here. Firstly, what gives clients or prospects the right to dictate who you can and can't work with? So I think that in itself is a reasonable question to ask. And I think anytime a client interferes with anytime a client interferes with who you can and can't work with, I think that is incredibly wrong. And the second question is, what gives clients the right to even ask who your other clients are? And this brings me to my last point here is, if you think about it, requesting customer information in any other business engagement would be considered extremely rude. So, if you think about this same situation in any other business setting, it doesn't make any sense at all. Point 2, exclusivity isn't offered in any other forms of marketing. Now, this was a conversation I had with a guy by the name of Jason Hennessy, who runs a $10 million agency, and they specialize in legal SEO. So they've niched down, and exclusivity, especially when you niche down, becomes of greater concern for obvious reasons. Now, his points, and these are points that I certainly agree with, he made the point of saying that exclusivity isn't offered in any other forms of advertising or marketing. And this brings me to my first question here, my first point, which is why is exclusivity requested for SEO, but seemingly nowhere else? Now, if you think about it, Facebook ads, they don't offer exclusivity, nor does Google ads, Instagram, or YouTube. And the same is probably true for many other platforms. They don't offer exclusivity. And if you think about it in terms of offline advertising, you think about newspapers, radio, television, magazines, and billboards are all the same. None of them offer exclusivity. You can't decide to advertise on the radio and then ask them, hey, wait a minute, we'll only advertise or run ads on your radio station if you can assure us that you're not going to run ads for any of our competitors. It just doesn't work that way. Now, put this slide together because I think this paints a picture perfectly, right? Could you imagine calling Facebook, let's say, and saying, oh, hi, is this Facebook? Yes, look, we're interested in running ads on your platform, but before doing so, we want to know if you're running ads for our competitor. It just wouldn't happen, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Point 3, most businesses don't have the capacity to support it. Now, I know this to be true because I worked with a plumber many years ago. In fact, we didn't end up working together because he wanted exclusivity. But before I get into that, the first point here that I need to cover is that most clients simply don't have the capacity or the resources to accommodate every customer in the market. Now, I want to bring special emphasis to that point because I'm going to circle back and touch on that again in just a moment. But getting back to the plumber that requested exclusivity, he requested exclusivity in a city with a population of 5 million. In fact, it was 5.5 million. Yet when I asked him how big his team was, he said he had 3 staff in one location. So that in itself is an absolutely ridiculous request because there's no way that they could accommodate every single plumbing job in Sydney. And this brings me to my last point, which is there's more than enough for everyone. Point 4, privacy. Okay, privacy, this one can get really complicated, and especially if you've got to be really careful here, because if you start signing NDAs and service level agreements and any type of legally binding contracts around offering exclusivity, you're going to put yourself at risk of, if things get bad enough, you're going to put yourself at risk of litigation. But I won't get into that, but I just want to touch on 2 points here. The first one is most clients, once they engage with you, want their information kept private. And the second point, it can get even more complicated when being asked to sign NDAs, especially if you've got a prospect asking, hey, are you working with, ABC mortgage brokers? If you've signed an NDA, you can't just blurt that out and let them know who you're working with. So this can get really, really complicated. It can get incredibly messy. So privacy is definitely something to be mindful of. Now, point 5, now this is probably the main one, growth versus loyalty. Now, if you think about it, if you're turning away numerous prospects, and these might be large projects, $100,000, $200,000 a year projects, if you're turning those projects away, well, then your business or your agency is at an immediate disadvantage because you're losing out on projects. And if you don't have those projects coming in, that stunts internal development and agency growth. And the reasons are obvious, because you don't have exposure to new platforms and systems, and you're not building relationships, and everything just grinds to a halt because instead of working with 10 legal firms, let's say, you're working with one. So you have less throughput. And that, of course, directly impacts revenue and in turn can negatively affect your marketing efforts, especially if you're investing in paid marketing. If you're running Facebook ads, let's say, or Google ads or YouTube ads, whatever that might be, both online and offline, you're going to have expenses. And if you don't have that money coming in because you're having to say no to everyone else, then that's going to make your marketing efforts certainly more challenging. And my last point here is clients are requesting loyalty without reciprocation. Now, I want to give you an example of what I mean by this. I put together this simple role play. Mr. Jones, hey, can you work with us exclusively? You, yeah, sure. And Mrs. Smith calls, Mrs. Smith, hey, can you help us? You, I'm sorry, but we have an agreement with Mr. Jones. Then the following day, Mr. Brown calls, hey, can you help us? You, again, I'm sorry, but we have an agreement with Mr. Jones. Guess what? 2 weeks later, Mr. Jones calls, hey, listen, we've decided to go in another direction. Thanks, but we're cancelling. You shit. So then, of course, you're in a mad panic. You go about making a whole bunch of follow-ups. You, Mrs. Smith, do you still need help? Mrs. Smith, sorry, but we're working with another agency. Mr. Brown, do you still need help? Mr. Brown, sorry, but we're working with another agency. Well, as you can see, that was pretty dumb. Now, the point I want to make here is that clients, essentially, when they're asking for exclusivity, clients are asking you to care more about their business than your own. Okay, so in summary, a couple of final thoughts. Clients should not define internal policies. If you've made the decision to not offer exclusivity, then clients and prospects especially should not have the ability to interfere or define those internal processes and policies. Now, my next point, and this one touches back on what I mentioned just a moment ago about thinking about the available market share. Exclusivity is often requested because the client is thinking about rankings and not available market share. And this, touches somewhat on a video that I shared recently about focusing on revenue, providing revenue-focused SEO as opposed to selling rankings. The whole conversation should be about available market share and helping them get customers and generating sales and improving the bottom line. So again, exclusivity is often requested because they're thinking about search in a one-dimensional way as opposed to the entire available market share. And lastly, I want to say this: don't feel obligated, and this is aimed at SEO consultants who are either operating as freelancers or even those that are running mid or large-scale agencies. Don't feel obligated to offer exclusivity simply because everyone tells you to. You've got to do what's right for your business. And I say that and I emphasize that point, especially because the majority of conversations that are happening online, both within Facebook groups, forums, and in many articles on well-respected sites, will all tell you that you should offer exclusivity for SEO. And that's something that I disagree with. Hey, if you've enjoyed this video and you'd like to learn more, head over to bringtheseo.com. We provide business development training for SEO consultants wanting to improve their processes, increase profits, and scale to $100,000 a month or more without all the stress and overwhelm.